Hello, Java class. All right, so our task for the aim of this short video clip is to get you guys started with Unit 6 Lab 1. Okay, so what is Unit 6 Lab 1? Well, it has to do with that bank class that we were talking about. So in this, your task is, let's see, your assignment is to build an application project that contains the bank class, Expo class, and the Unit 6 Lab 1 class. Okay, 3 classes, 1 project workspace. So before we read any further, I want you guys to go ahead and get started with that. So to do that, okay, follow my steps. So if you go to your Unit 6 folder, and you will notice in there for the lab 1 for Unit 6, you will notice there's the lab 06ast.java, bank.java. Yeah, they are these 2 files. Okay, so you guys need to go ahead and download these 2 files. So click on them and it'll download them. And if you look at your downloads folder, you should notice it there. So I see my bank and I see my lab 06ast. Okay, you need your Expo file too, so I have mine downloaded already, but I'm sure you guys have as well. From there, our next task is this. Okay, from our let's go ahead and create a new project. It'll be basic Java application, and I am going to call this, I'm going to give this a location of my desktop for now. And I'm going to call this Unit 6 Lab 1. And if I hit create a new workspace, and let me do this one more time. If I go to my desktop, okay, Unit 6 Lab 1, new workspace, next. Next, run application, finish. For that, my workspace is being built. All right, this is my new workspace, Unit 6 Lab 1, right? And my default hello world is here. Before doing anything, I just want to build and run my project and see if everything looks okay. Looks like it built fine, and I see my console. All looks good here. All right, step 2. The next thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and add the other class files that we were talking about. Okay, so if you click on source and do add existing files, and if I go to my downloads, whoops, okay, download, and I click on my bank, and I do open, and I do add. So now it's in my workspace. Likewise, I'm going to do, I should add my other class too. So add existing files, and if I click on my downloads, my Expo. I'm not adding this file. I'm only adding my bank and my Expo, okay? And I add. So these are the 3 files that your lab tells you to add to your workspace. Unit 6 Lab 1, Expo, and bank. Okay, perfect. Now, the next task that I'm going to do, what was that 3rd file that we downloaded, or that lab 6 OAST? Well, let's look at that file some more. So if I go to my downloads and I just try opening that file, mine opened with Notepad. You guys can choose Notepad also to open it if you all wish. And what you want to do is go ahead, and this file actually has some starter code, and this will help you get started with your lab. So go ahead and take it, okay? But because I did not want to mess with the name and everything, so I did not decide to directly add it to my project. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to copy everything in that starter code. Then I'm going to delete this and paste it in here. And there's one more thing I need to copy, and that is this one, the import for decimal format. Get that and paste it right above my class. Okay, now everything looks okay in here. Well, now let's talk about what our lab says. Okay, so if we look at the starter code, what is present on this? If we look at the starter code, it looks like it is creating, well, 4 objects. Okay, from the decimal format class, it's creating money. And from the bank class, it's creating 3 objects, Tom, Susie, and Bill. So do we see that? 2 classes, the decimal format and bank, and 4 objects. Okay, Now your task, first task says over here, create a fourth object of the bank class using your name as the variable and using the non-default constructor, which includes the checking and savings balances as parameters. Let's talk about this some more, okay? Now that we can actually view our bank class, go ahead and so if you noticed here, right, what is the constructor used for? A constructor is used for initializing your object that you created. So for your bank class, Tom, Susie, and Bill, all of them are being initialized slightly differently. Like for Tom, there are no parameters that are being passed here. And for Susie, there are 2 parameters being passed here. So how is this working? Well, it'll help you if you guys look at your bank class. So in your bank class, what it contains is, so these are your attributes of the bank class. Remember how we spoke about a class can have variables, and the rest of the elements in your class are your objects. Sorry, are your methods. Okay, well, there are 2 methods that are very special in a class. Or there is a kind of a method that is very special in a class. And that kind of a method does not have a return type. Do you see every other method that you see here has a return type, either void or double? This method in your class does not have a return type. It has the same name of the class, that is bank. What this method is called, these are called your constructors, okay? And you can create them slightly differently depending on what you want to do. What a constructor is used for? It's used for initializing an attribute associated with an object. The attributes associated with an object. So here, for my constructor, I decide to give checking and savings initial values of 0. And I make another constructor, but now which takes in parameters, which sets checking and savings to an initial value. That way, now when I look at my lab 601 for Tom, if I wish to give it just the 0, I can just call it this way. That is, I just leave it empty. And for Susie, right, when I want to give it an initial value, I can call it this. I can call this one by passing it the parameter. So your compiler automatically knows by looking at this whether it should go to this one or it should go to this one, right? If it sees no parameters, your compiler will call this. And if it sees some parameters, your compiler will call this. That way you have Susie and you have Bill. Okay, so let's see. Now let's read what's happening. So they're saying the fourth object that you create says it should use the non-default constructor, which includes checking and saving balances as parameters. That is, you're trying to create a fourth object with your name using this approach. That means it should be something very similar to what Susie or Bill has. Okay. What do we see in Bill? Well, Bill is a little unique, right? So for Susie, it looks like we're giving fixed values of 1,600 and 32,000, which means that is Susie's initial checking and initial savings values. So Susie has an initial checking of 1,600 and initial savings of 32,000. But look at Bill. Bill has 8,000 as the initial checking and a random number between 20,000 and 90,000 as the initial savings. So that's a computer generated number. So you do not know what that is. That is going to be a very fun thing to work with later on in the lab. Okay, so what do you need to do in this lab? Pretty much after you create your fourth object, it says display the initial checking and savings balances of the 4 people using good financial format. Okay, so when they say good financial format, you guys need to remember this is talking about that money, right? You're going to use the money and choose a way of displaying it. So the first task is you're just displaying their initial values. So this is something you need to think about. What method of my bank class lets me display what the checking and savings is? And this is also there in your presentation. Let's look at what the methods are. You have get checking, get savings, checking deposit, savings deposit, checking withdrawal, savings withdrawal are the different methods of this bank class. Okay, so if you look at this, your task first thing is to just display what the initial values are. Then what you're doing is you are now making some transactions. You're having Tom's initial deposit be 500 and then Tom's initial savings deposit, so that was his checking deposit, and savings deposit be 7,000. And then after you do Tom's, okay, Bill's, what you're doing is Bill withdraws the entire balance of 8,000 from his checking. So he put 8,000. So you're removing all those 8,000. And then after that, what you're saying, Susie transfers 20,000 from savings to checking. Savings to checking, you need to transfer 20,000. And then finally, Bill withdraws the entire savings balance. Now they're asking you, well, when you created Bill, in his savings account, you put a random number, and they're asking you, you need to perform a transaction that would remove all of the money that is there in Bill's savings account. Right? So it puts a note over there. Note, you will not know what the value to withdraw is because the amount was generated as a random number. So you'll have to do some thinking about that. And then finally, your lab, what you're going to do is you're going to display the final checking and savings balance for all the 4 people in a good financial format. And if you scroll down, your expected output is going to look something like this. You have your console is basically very simple, right? You're going to do this. Initial balances. This is based on the first thing that you're doing. So it's saying display the initial checking. So this is what that display will look like. Tom's checking savings, Susie's checking savings, Bill's checking savings, and to this you will also add your checking savings. Finally, your final balances after that transaction. This is an example of what that would look like. Okay. With that, you guys, I think y'all are all set to begin. Your presentation will help you if you have any questions, and I can help you further clarify anything that you'll need. Well, enjoy coding this lab. God bless you guys.